Back at it again. RIC in a place to be. Ric Serritella here, going all access with the director of player personnel for the USFL, John Peterson, joining us on today's show. Coach, good morning. How we doing?
Good, great. I'm talking to you from sunny and warm San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah, and I'm over here at the Jersey Shore checking in. We got some good sunshine fresh off the beach and trying to get it in while we can because in the world of football, there is no off season, as you know.
No,
One of the hardest men in business right here. I will say, Coach, you are literally on location across the nation, scouting full season. We're going to get into some of the upcoming events, places you'll be, things you'll be doing. For those of you at home, if you don't know, it's funny because you're what we call the football lifer, but a lot of times the scouts and evaluators they're behind the scenes. The average fan might not know who some of those individuals are, but if you don't, if you've been living under a rock, Coach is a football lifer. He's been involved in pro football for at least 40 years, I believe. Coach, correct me if I'm wrong, with the NFL, CFL. I know you've got a bunch of college experience. The CO Bricado Scout of the Year in 2010 when you were with the Carolina Panthers, a very accomplished resume there.
thank you. Actually, someone asked me that the other day, and I had to think about it. And I said, this is my 49th year in the industry, in the football industry. So it's been a blessing. I've enjoyed every bit of it. When I retired from the National Football League after 19 years in the NFL, and obviously many other leagues prior to that and post, it's just fun. It's part of my life. It makes me happy. I can only cut the grass once a week. This gives me something I could do all the time.
No, we could only be so lucky and so fortunate to spend so much time in the game. And I'm with you, Coach. I'm on a vacation every day. I love what I do: talking football, watching football, playing football when I can. But I want to talk about the USFL a little bit. We're going to get into some of the grid camp showcases that are coming up, and of course, we had you out at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. We'll get that in as well. But very huge accomplishment. Second completed full season in the books for the USFL. Birmingham taking home the crown once again. And, the talent, I thought, very high level. We're seeing guys now get NFL opportunities once again. Cavante Turpin a year ago, I think, is the ultimate story, coming off the street and becoming a Pro Bowl millionaire within a short period of time. It looks like the stakeholders are happy. I see player signings for the USFL for next season. I see season tickets on sales. Where are we at with kind of the overall perspective of the league?
You bet. And thanks, Rick. Last year, our first year in the league of USFL 2, because obviously USFL was back in the early 1980s. We had 3 years. But when we came back last year, we had one location called the Hub Concept, okay? And that was in Birmingham, Alabama, where we had all 8 teams located right there in Birmingham, playing our games at Protective Stadium. It's an insurance company that owned the naming rights to it, a brand new stadium, state of the art. And then also we played a couple games later in the year at legendary Legion Field in Birmingham. And then our playoff games were held, the semis and the finals, at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Tom Benson Stadium, on the campus of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And again, we did that same thing this year. At the completion of last year, 69 of the 400 USFL players signed NFL contracts, okay? Obviously, a number of them made it on active rosters, practice rosters, so forth. You mentioned Cavante Turpin. Interesting story. When I did him when he was coming out of TCU, and when I was in college scouting at that time with the Carolina Panthers, and really liked him. And then it kind of got, when I retired and this kind of came about and he had kind of appeared on the horizon, I did a lot of evaluation on him and so forth, and kind of, got him in our draft. And obviously he was taken, in the rest of the stories where he's at today with the Dallas Cowboys. But we've got a number of players that have had their careers rejuvenated from the USFL. So many of our players and I'm just going to throw out the statistic, probably maybe not accurate, but close. About 80% of our players in the USFL have been in the NFL at one time, okay? Whether it was a practice roster, a training camp, active roster, whatever. And obviously their goal is to get back. And that's what our goal is. We want these players to come into our program, play well, do well, and have the opportunity to go back. You know, a lot of agents says, well, you know, I need to get a highlight tape of your player at the end of the season. I say, oh, wait a minute. We don't do that. We don't need to do that, because after every weekend's ball games, every snap goes to the duplication center in Philadelphia. And then by the end of the week, all 32 teams have our ball games from the weekend. So the pro departments are continually evaluating our players, okay, on a regular basis. We want our players to go to the National Football League. We don't make any bones about it. That's what we want to happen for them. Okay. Now, for that process, they're able to go after the completion of our season, which in this case was either June 17th if you didn't make the playoffs, and July 1 was the championship game in Canton, Ohio. So anytime when your season is ended, whether you're in playoffs or the regular season's done, and the NFL comes calling and they're going to offer you a contract, we release you from our contract, which is a 2-year deal, and off you go. If you don't make it and you re-sign with us, that's great. And even when you re-sign with us, it's November. You go and now you get another call to go on a practice roster, and we release you again. The only time that you can't go back to NFL is when we start our season, which we theoretically say January 1st, when we start having our coaches with Zoom meetings with their players and that type of thing. So you basically have about 6 months where you can, under contract with us, they get a contract from the NFL, you can leave and go. We want that, okay? And obviously with 69 people our first year, we're excited about that. We're optimistic that we're going to go past that this year with our season just ending just over 2 weeks ago on July 1 championship game, where Birmingham won their second consecutive championship. So that kind of gives you a little idea of what we're all about from that standpoint. But when you look at what we're all about on the overall, so we had our championship game. Our different representatives, our general managers and some coaches and so forth will be going out to the NFL camps here shortly. As you mentioned, that season is upon us, okay? With that being said, for each one of our 8 teams, they're responsible for 4 NFL teams that they watch and they evaluate, and they have the rights to these certain players should they come free and they want to sign with us, okay? So that's our next process, is the NFL camps. Before I talked to you this morning, I'm working on my training camp. Where am I going? This and that and so forth. So that's on the horizon for us very shortly, to go out to the NFL camps, watch NFL. You know, we have a situation where we get all the NFL games, preseason, regular season, and that type of thing. So we're always watching that particular pro level of football, okay? So we go out. Once the camps are done and the regular season happens, we're actively working on signing our players, okay, for the next year, okay? An evaluation process that goes. And obviously, as a player gets let go, he says, well, I'm going to wait because I might get a call to be on a practice roster. Maybe it's October 1st I get a call, and I'll go back to the Cleveland Browns or wherever. Okay, so that's kind of the process, and it works. And at the same time, we have 2 scouts, 2 college scouts, and they do both college and pros, ex-NFL veteran scouts who work for us, okay? And they're also getting ready to go out to camps, and they'll focus when the fall comes with the colleges ready, getting ready for our college draft. So we're getting there.
No, great information. John Peterson, Director of Personnel for the USFL. I want to get into that process a little bit there, Coach. Just for clarification, you mentioned there's 8 USFL teams. Each team will be responsible for scouting 4 NFL teams. Now, is that an allocated process, or are they pooling the information and sharing that?
No, it's allocated. For instance, the Pittsburgh Maulers have the Cleveland Browns, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis. Those are the 4 teams that they're allocated to. Okay. Now,
Got it.
when a player comes out and from one of those teams and has been released, okay, if he was in the draft year 2020, 21, and 22, now let me back up, no, 21, 22, 23, that team, in this case Pittsburgh, would have the rights to those players and those from those draft years. If a player was from the year 220 and less, 220, 219, and so forth, those are still free agents around the league for us. Okay, so when Pittsburgh loses a guy who gets cut, I should say not loses, gets released, and he was in the 218 draft, maybe he's 26, 27 years old, he's free game for any of one of our 8 teams in the league. Okay, so that's how that goes. But it gives us an opportunity with younger players to be able to focus on those guys and where they're going and so forth. Okay, and that's a process that we do have. Okay.
No, very good. That's great information. So last 3 years draft classes will be allocated. It sounds like it's geographically based, which is good and makes it easier for the scout life. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about, and we'll get into some of these free agent camps, specifically the grid, formerly the hub. And I just want to get this information out. We have a lot of agents who listen to the show, a lot of players looking for information on the league. You mentioned another rookie draft. Will there be a supplemental draft? Do you guys have plans for that yet? Is that still being discussed?
You bet. So, Rick, first of all, where are we going with the hub and the grid and so forth? So the hub originally started, I guess it's probably 3 years now. It's pretty close to it, in San Diego in the Southern California area. And that's where they were focusing their workouts. When we came involved a year or so ago, we got involved. We got a relationship with them, okay? So that, for instance, when they had one in San Diego, I would fly out there. I would evaluate, okay? I'm watching players, okay, from across the country, who on their own accord have come out there. They want to be looked at, okay? So we would test them and time them, different type of position drills for those players, running wide receiver routes, and he's a defensive lineman doing some off the edge pass rush and so forth. From those lists, from those players, and approximately about 50 players per camp, and camp it's a long 1-day experience. Let's say I would come up with, after all those, and maybe I say I'm going to look at 8 players out of the 50 that really met the requirements or certainly had my interest. I would then go back and then I would get tape on these players, whether it was college or NFL or CFL, whatever it might have been, and evaluate them. So I might be able to narrow it down to 4 out of the 8 that we want to go after and put we call our hot list. From that evaluation principle, on a weekly basis, we put out new players that we evaluate on a list to the 8 general managers of our teams, where they can look at that and read my report, read our scouts reports, everything that we do, and if they have a desire to sign a player at that position, or if it's during the season, I just lost a player. I need a defensive end. I just lost him. He broke his leg Saturday. Okay. So now they can go to that hot list, and we've already evaluated. We've got a full evaluation with numerically and verbally and you name it, and they can go to that and say, okay, here these 2 guys on your hot list are interesting. I'm going to follow up with that, okay? Or themselves, they can on their own find players as well, okay? So we have a dual type of concept for procurement of our players for the league. It's themselves, the individual general managers and that coaching staff working it, and myself with my scouting staff, league scouting staff working it, okay? So we take it from 2 different components and work it that way. So that's the way we're in. So right now in this quote off season, if you want to use that term, I'm continually putting players into the hot list for them to look at, in addition to what they do personally as well. And obviously these players can come off an NFL roster because he got let go and we think he's that good and so forth. Or it could be a guy who just came out of college. Now, I've got a list right now I'm working with. And we just finished going over all the mini camps that the 32 NFL teams conducted, okay? And out of that, maybe all these, oh my gosh, hundreds and hundreds of guys that went to mini camps, we've narrowed it down to perhaps 10 that we put on the hot list. Now, these are guys that are just mostly just out of the draft this past spring and didn't, went to a mini camp, didn't get a contract offered to them, and obviously not in the training camp now. So we're working it from all different components. We work it from free agency, from the different levels, whether it's a Canadian player, an NFL player. We get the XFL players that might become free agents or whatever. We're looking at that. And then, of course, we do a whole college thing. So this past year, we had our first college draft in the month of mid-February of 2023. And we selected 10 players per unit, per team. And the teams did that. Now, obviously, I gave them all kinds of evaluations to look at and so forth. But they themselves used the general manager and the staff to put together, okay, and so we've got a list. We've got 6 wide receivers and this and that and so forth, whatever they've narrowed it down to, we're going to take one of this and one of that. And they drafted in the first round or second round. And then when they drafted, obviously the great majority were waiting for the NFL from February, many of them going to the combine in Indianapolis and pro days in March. And so these young men were waiting for the NFL, which is totally understand. They grew up with that. Okay, I want to play in the National Football League. So we now hold the rights to those guys as they waited for the draft and so forth. Some were drafted, some signed as free agents. Fine. Those teams have the rights to those players for a period of time. Okay. Some were then signed after we started the season. Hey, I didn't get drafted. I went to minicamp. I didn't get a contract, but I was drafted by Pittsburgh Maulers. Pittsburgh signs him. It's, we're in week 5 of our regular season. And he comes on to the weekly inactive list and produces from there, and so forth. So it's an ongoing massive process, but there is very delineated and very meticulous of how we do it, but it is a very comprehensive evaluation program and the procurement of the players.
Yeah, it's a very fluid process. In fact, I would say it is year round. And as we're talking, just this morning, I woke up, I saw the quarterback. I think Case Cookus is re-upping for another season. I saw the offensive player of the year from his hotel window showing us the Giant Stadium. He's going to work out there tomorrow. So a lot of players on the move, a lot of players coming and going. And that is to be expected of what I would say is a developmental league. You mentioned these guys need live bullets, especially the quarterbacks. There is nothing that can replicate in-game experience. And the closest thing is probably these free agent showcases and workouts like the hub football and the grid football camps. They do these OTA style workouts. Coach, I was lucky enough to get out to about a dozen of them or so. And I do know that from the first USFL draft, I believe 85 of the 285 selections were actually Hub Football alumni. So they did a very good job creating the awareness, and we're going to get into that. But I'm happy that you've kind of verified the picture I've always painted. People ask me all the time, well, how does the USFL scouting process work? And it's kind of centralized where it's being funneled through someone of incredible experience such as yourself, but it is 8 independent organizations with decision makers that ultimately make their own decisions. And so it's kind of a collaborative effort, and it's a never-ending process. Not enough time in the day, Coach. So let's talk more about the free agent camps. You mentioned you were out at Hub. You were interacting with these guys, measuring these guys, timing these guys, testing them, studying them. And, it is an invitation process, the Hub camp. And now it has kind of morphed into the grid camps ran by Tom Goodhines, who was the VP of operations at Hub Football Camp. So he's going to keep the momentum going, and he's going to continue to work with the USFL and individuals as yourself, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And Tom and his staff, marvelous job. I mean, the first time I went to the Hub camp in San Diego, I kind of said, holy smokes, this thing is extremely well run. Okay. The players here have been they've been evaluated. Then just you can't walk up to the hub camp and say, I want to do it. Okay. There's a process that they do for the players that are there. They want the best quality that they can, no doubt. Okay. So, and the statistics you said, phenomenal success that they've had. Now that Tom Goodhines is now the chief operator of the grid camp, okay, they've taken it and now they're going nationwide, other than focusing mostly in the San Diego, Southern California area. So, for instance, on August 13th, Sunday, there's a grid camp at Westchester University outside of Philadelphia, and we'll certainly have a representative there, whether it's one of our coaches or one of my scouts who lives in that area. I'm planning having him go there. So anyway, we'll have representation. Why do we have representation? Because we're looking for quality football players. And this is just not a walk-up window where, hey, I want to just run a 40 for you. No, these are quality guys that are right on that verge, okay, of having an opportunity, sign a contract in our league. They've had workouts in the past with NFL people and so forth. So it's a high quality level of players that are there, and that's why we've associated with them. That's why we've interact with them and have an association with them on a very close basis, okay, because of that, okay. And when you figure this, that you've got 50-some people in one location, and all I've got to do is just get there and then observe and watch. And when I get done, I'm going to pick out maybe 10, 12 guys that I want to interview. And I will interview those players at the end of the event and get to know them, get to know their backgrounds. How can I watch tape on you? Well, I went to this university. Good. You just came out last year or 2 years ago. And then you were in this NFL camp last summer and so forth. So this is the type of thing that we do. It's an ongoing process, but at the same time, the grid camp is an ongoing process, a multitude of different locations of activities and events throughout the country. And that's what's exciting about it. And, I've got a motto that I've used my whole life. Quality people build quality programs. Quality players builds a quality program, quality product. And we want the quality product on the field for our viewers, for our fans, for the television, for those people who are involved watching us. We want the highest quality character and player we possibly can in our organization. And this is one of our methods within that overall comprehensive methodology that we have for retaining player personnel.
No, there's a lot of good talent out there. You made the point, Cavante Turpin last year, whether it's an injury, an off-season issue, a need of more reps, there's just a need out there for these players to get seen, and it seems to be doing pretty well. So we're looking forward to. I'll be down there. In fact, I know one of the USFL coaches, Coach John D. Filippo, will be involved with the event, so they'll be getting that hands-on experience. Of course, former Philadelphia Eagles coach, so he returns back to the Philadelphia area. And I would like to add that, part of that hub or grid now experience is you get the feedback, right, from the coaching staff. And Tony Racioppi, I know, has been added. He trained Kenny Pickett coming out for the draft. Aaron Beasley is going to be the DB coach. They're getting trained and coached up by former NFL or current NFL and college coaches, and they're leaving there a better player. I've seen it firsthand. They're getting coached up on the technique, some of the fundamentals they need to be cleaned up. In fact, we even had a couple guys that switched positions and were able to extend their career by going to the camp and talking to the coaches. So I think that's another element of value that these players get when they attend these grid camp showcases.
Well, another thing too, Rick, is last year at one of the camps, there's a young white running back that I really liked when he came out of college. And for whatever reason, and it was, he's a good person and all that. Everything was good with the character and everything. But for whatever reason, he kind of fell through the cracks. And so I had watched him on film a number of times. I'd given him a good grade into our hot system and so forth. And all of a sudden, he showed up last spring at the hub camp in San Diego. And I said, oh, my God, I saw a whole different feature of him that I didn't see on film at that time in his development. Now, again, a year later, he's a running back. His route running of routes out of the backfield and the quickness that he could stick and cut and plant and separate. I, I, I was mesmerized by it. My gosh, I watched you on film, but I didn't see these kind of things. Well, coach, I've been working with this and that and so forth. And I just had to get down. I knew you're going to be here. I just got to get in front of you. And, so, I mean, a perfect example of it. And this guy, and of course, I told him to all our GMs and so forth. And here's the tape, watch this. But you got to understand this young man's ability and what he's done with his abilities since you watch tape as a college senior is really marvelous what he's done in the training that he's doing. And most of all, the desire that he has to want to play, the desire and the love and passion for the game that he exhibits. And he wants to. That's all there's to it. So, but that's what this is all about. It's an opportunity, and there's just so many young people out there. And I should say, quote, middle-aged young men who played the game of football in the 26, 27 range and so forth.
Sure.
Who still
Thirsty dogs.
And have the talent and have the desire. So it's another opportunity for them to get in front of us. And there's basically the four phases that we have in this process of evaluation. Number one is identification, identifying players who are out there, identifying talent that's out there, identifying people who have ability. The number two then is from that is to go ahead and watch them and to what we call qualify them. So when I sit down after an event like this and I'm interviewing a young man, I'm qualifying him on a number of different areas, okay? The third component is evaluation, getting tape, watching him play the game, whether it's live, on tape, whatever. And the final, fourth comprehensive program is then recruitment or signing, okay? So the first phase that we're talking about, the phase of identification, is what the grid camp is all about. We're identifying players. Now, yes, I may know this guy from somewhere else. I may have watched tape on him somewhere else. But for the most part, it's phase one of the evaluation process. Evaluation is the last one. It's the number one phase, which is identifying. And I'm watching these guys. I'm identifying. This guy can run. Oh, my gosh, look at he's got some flexible hips. Look at his ball skills. Oh, and I'm making notes. And I'm getting guys' names and numbers down. I want to talk with this guy. These are the 8 or 10 guys that I want to go back and watch tape on. And then after I watch tape, I've interviewed him. I've got his agent's number. I've got the kid's number. I'm going to work. Okay.
Yeah, Coach, I'm excited. I can't wait for August 13th. Buckle up. I got to say though, I think you make a great point because it's human nature, somewhat, I believe, and you know better than I do. But I feel like sometimes it's so hard for a scout or an evaluator to get over they get this final impression in college once they leave school, and that's the last image they have. But players can improve after they leave college. They can get better, to your point, and they can sharpen their route running or find a new skill set. And I think that's probably the most unique or fascinating part. And I talk to so many players, and they'll say, "Oh, my hammy, I had a tight hammy. My agent told me to run. I really didn't want to do it. Kind of, it was a death sentence, and it ruined me." Or there's so many stories out there. But I think that's the biggest learning lesson that I've taken as an evaluator is just that players can improve. You can't just stick with that last impression. And I think we're all guilty of doing it at some point in time. But getting that new film out there and being able to see that might open the eyes of a decision maker that didn't realize that you could do a certain skill set or play a certain position.
What you're saying, Rick, think of it this way. A young man leaves college, 4-year degree, leaves college. Let's say he's 23 years old, just turned 23. He's not an athlete. He's a business major. He gets a job, first level job in the business world. Maybe he's working for a financial company. And he starts out And he doesn't know. What he knows is what with textbooks and maybe a little bit of experiential learning that he had prior while he was in school. And all of a sudden, he's in his environment, he's in his element, and he's with those people that are pros and they know what to work with him and so forth and allow him to develop. But as long as he's got the motivation to get better, to develop, he has a passion to do what he wants to do whatever the environment, whatever the activity is, and he progresses. And all of a sudden, a year or so later, he sits down and talks with his professor from the business department at the university he was at. And all of a sudden, the professor is going, "Holy cow! How did this guy get where he's at tonight? He sure didn't understand this. When I talked to him, he didn't know that. You know,
Sure.
how? It's basically through the hard work, dedication, leadership that we have. There's a formula that I had in graduate school at the University of Utah many years ago. And the professor, he had a theory. His name was Clark W. Hetherington. And this is an old school guy. And he had a formula for education. It goes like this: man plus environment plus the activity plus leadership equals education or production. Man plus the environment he's in, plus the activity he's involved with, plus the leadership that he's been given and working with can produce education or production. And you can apply that to anything, okay? Man, that's you and I in the environment that we're at. And that this young person is out of the college environment and in a work environment with this kind of activity that he enjoys, with the proper leadership of people working with him, giving him experiential learning at the same time, other than just book work. Hey, I want you to do this. You know, this past spring, I had a young man named Matt McCreate. And Matt was a young man who just graduated from Bucknell University. And his dad was in our league with Cincinnati and Indianapolis and Kansas City and so forth for a number of years. And the young man wrote me and he said, "I'm graduating in December. I bet I've lived in a scouting environment with my dad for many years, but I want to go into it. Is it possible that I could get an internship with the USFL? I graduate in December and come right, I'm ready." So we took him and he was with us for 4 months, of our whole 4-month period. And obviously I worked with him every day. And obviously, besides his knowledge he had from his father and other activities and playing the game himself, all of a sudden, this guy just began to blossom. And I'd work with him. We'd evaluate tape. All right, what about writing a report? All right, let's work on your report writing skills. How do I write a report? Well, here's the basic concepts that we start with. Okay, and we went right through it and right through it. And then he was so computer literate, outstanding, that he was so significant helping me with all kinds of different things on the computer and our programs and whatnot, and a multitude of players that we're involved with and whatnot. Well, at the end of it, he said, "You know what? I'd like to get in the National Football League." I said, "Matt," I said, "as an introductory level position, you're ready for it. You just had 4 months of intense schooling one-on-one." And guess
That's
what?
great.
Yesterday, he went to the Chicago Bears to start the summer program with the Chicago Bears. Okay.
Outstanding. I love
But
to hear that.
yeah, and I mean, and that's where we're at in this world, whether it's athletics, whether it's business, whatever, medicine, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Young people need the opportunity. But again, it's that person in his environment, working that environment, where he's at, with the activity that he's involved with, and with leadership helping him progress. That
Yeah.
experiential. And guess
That's
what?
a
The production occurs. I'm getting off subject, but
No,
anyways.
that's a great lesson. No, I'm all about this, coach. I'm buckled up and hunkered down. In fact, I tell students at the Sports Management Worldwide function at the combine every year. I say, surround yourself with the people, places, and things you want to become. And it reminds me of a quote from Jim Rohn, who I listen to religiously, who says, "You're the average of the five people you hang around with.
There
You
you go.
become the average of the five people you hang around with." So, if you don't mind, since you have been involved in this game as a coach, a scout, an executive, is there? And we have a lot of people that come through NFL Draft Bible and interns. We got a handful of interns now as we speak, uh, Coach, who want to be aspiring NFL scouts. Is there a piece of advice that you have received during your career, or a piece of advice that you could give to a young aspiring scout in terms of breaking into the business? It's very difficult. It could be very tedious and frustrating, and some of the grunt work when you first assigned into the business can be not the stuff you wake up in the morning looking forward to do. But we've all got to start somewhere. So, what kind of advice can you pass forward?
Well, after I retired, it's now been 7 years from the National Football League. I was hired on as an instructor and with the Scouting Academy run by Dan Hatman.
Yep.
And we have been very successful in placing a number of our scout students in the National Football League. Last year at this time, we had over 55 students in introductory positions in the National Football League in scouting. At this time last year, we had over 150 Division I Power 5 students working in player personnel at the universities. So I guess my first thought would be okay, how do I establish a base? I have a desire or I have an interest. Let's start out with I have an interest first. All right. So for instance, I teach a class. Next Tuesday night is class number 4. We go from here. We started back in June and we'll go all the way to December with teaching every aspect of scouting, every aspect from how do I even get a credential to all the way through to on the road and, everything that's involved in a 12-month calendar for a scout. And then we also teach a class in the spring, which we finished. It's a recruiting class for those who want to get into college personnel work. Myself and other guest lectures, and also we speak. And it's been very, very successful. Again, it's the Scouting Academy. You can go online. I know I'm sounding like a promoter, but at the same time,
no, they do a great job. Yeah. Yep,
yeah.
Dan Hatman's his reputation precedes him, right? I mean, they've done an
Yeah.
outstanding job there, and I think they're pretty well known, right? And I wasn't aware you're teaching over there, so now we've got new information to distribute to the listening audience.
Yeah, I've been with him for 7 years since I retired. So, but it's fun. And once again, we also, besides teaching lecture-wise on Zoom or in guest lectures and so forth, we're also extremely strong in experiential learning. So to give you an example, our students right now, our last session we had last week, I was prepping them to go out to NFL camps. They're required to go visit an NFL camp or two and then write reports from their observation. Okay. Then when that's all done, and we teach them how to do it. How do I even ask for a credential? How do I, that type of thing. So we do every phase there. And then when they write the reports and so forth, then we get back and we go back over it with them. We process that experience. What was good? Well, I had a chance to stand next to a scout from the CFL and we talked and this and that and so forth. Hey, that's great. What did you talk about? Wow, we're looking at this wide receiver and how he gets off the press and this kind of things. So the experiential learning component is we lecture the first part of the month, experiential learning the next part. They're gonna go out to colleges and evaluate college players as well. And obviously we have to help them to get permission to do that and so forth. But the experiential learning and then the processing of their event is so critical to go back over it. Give them some suggestions. Well, then next time you might think of it this way. You might ask that scout you sat next to from the Philadelphia Eagles, you might ask him, how are you looking at this guy right now? What's impressive about this corner you're watching right now? So that process for us is just so important that we have that. And that's basically the same experience that Matt McCreate just had with us in the USFL. He had 4 months of every day Sunday through Sunday. It never stopped for 4 straight months. And he also got involved not only in scouting, but in game day preparation. He got into production, the production on Friday before the players come in, all those kind of things. So he had a multitude besides just scouting of this experience. And when he left to go to Chicago, he said to me, he says, I had no earthly clue what goes on behind the scenes to put a game on or to sign a player or whatever we were doing. I was a former player. I just got on the bus when I was supposed to get on it and eat lunch when they told me to eat lunch and shut up. That's all I knew. So that's what's important about it, that they have a multitude of events that they can experience.
No, enjoying our conversation, Coach. We went a little overtime here. Appreciate the time. I do got to get a selfish question in because I know our good mutual friend Tom Goodhines kind of asked us to talk about the grid. I wanted to catch up with you on the USFL, but also the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, which I'm involved with. We had you out there. I saw the USFL very well represented, and hopefully you'll be out again in 2024. But not too many people, not a lot of media presence out there, so not a lot of people hear or see the experience of the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, which I'm a little biased, but I believe we do a pretty good job. But you've been there now, I believe, several times. Do you enjoy the experience? Tell the people at home a little bit about what you expect when you show up to the NFLPA Bowl, if you don't mind.
Well, my first thought is I worked for the NFLPA Bowl for my first 2 years after I retired. Okay.
Awesome.
And
Okay.
so I was there for 2 years. I was on the road. I had my area.
Yeah.
Don't forget. In fact, I guess I'll
Which
toot
area?
on.
What was your area when you were with the PA?
I had more of the central mid America kind of area, the Texas,
Okay.
Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, I threw the horn. My first year there, we had the most players that were drafted out of the NFLPA, and we had more people drafted than we did the East-West game. So, I mean, that's kind of like our competition. We're going out and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
Out of 110 players, we had 99 get contracts, and I don't forget all the number of ones that signed or was drafted. But anyway, it's a great event. It is a great event. And you're right, Rick, it's not as the media attractive as some of the other all-star games. But the players that are there are good, really good, solid college football players with the ability to play at the next level, no doubt about it. And it's put on such a classy event. I mean, the 2 years I was there, of course, in Southern California, one was at down in, I forget the city, but it was a soccer stadium down south. Then the next year Carson. Next year we're at the Rose Bowl and downtown at the highest building hotel in the city of LA. And God, that was a trip to get off to go register and you look out 79 floors up. But anyways, it is a great event. And what makes it unique is these players are getting quality coaching, but they're also exposed to the game in maybe a little bit different way. Now they're exposed to the game in a pro setting with pro coaches that they haven't had before. So now they're learning and experiencing the pro game for truly the first time. And that's what it is that week. It's the pro game, okay, by pro coaches. And so that's what makes it exciting for them to say, holy smokes, I didn't realize I'm an offensive lineman and I didn't realize how I need to use my hands to stab on the upfield shoulder, put the hand on the hip and steer this guy, okay? All kinds of different technique, but at the same time, the philosophy of the pro game as well. So it's an exciting time for the young men, and it's exciting to get these young guys together from all across the country. And all of a sudden, hey, we're playing a game of football. It's the same as I played in college, wherever I was. But guess what? I've got a guy from USC. I got a guy from Notre Dame. Yeah, this is great. It's a great experience.
No, and I will say some of those coaches like Jackie Slater are just as excited as the players to teach them that technique, man. It's really a good time. In fact, we had a few of the NFLPA coaches wind up and coaching the USFL. Jeff Fisher, Anthony Beck went on to another league, and Steve Kaiser is your guy there in Michigan, right? So
Steve is one of my very best friends, and
yeah.
tell you stories. We go back, and yeah, he's one of my very best friends, and so and, and believe me, when the PA game was done, he brought all his reports. He said, "Okay, that game's done. Let's get him ready for our draft."
Oh
So
yeah. Oh, he was doing street free agent kickers and punter showcases down the road. I love Stevie.
exactly.
He's got the sickness.
When we left there, he and I drove down and did a kicking camp. Okay,
Yep.
down in San Diego. Exactly. Yeah,
Gotta love it. Well, hey, Coach, man, this was outstanding. Really appreciate the time, the insight, the information. Anything that we did not cover that we should get out there before we go?
we got a good base covered. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think we did. We covered a lot of ground, and maybe a couple months down the road, we can check back in, see where everything's at. Look forward to catching up with your staff down at the Grid
You
Camp
bet.
August 13th, and hopefully more talent enter the
Absolutely.
USFL. All
We're
right, there
always
we have it.
we're always
Director of
looking.
Personnel, USFL, John Peterson, Ric Serritella here. All access. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep it locked.